Hi there, my name is Dan Hogan, and today I'm going to take you through my 4-week strength and power intervention designed to improve ball carrying ability in sub-elite rugby union. This intervention forms part of my continuous assessment of the athlete monitoring and coaching technology module. So, just to give you a brief introduction to rugby, it's a contact-based team sport in which the movement demands are characterized by repeated bouts of high-intensity activity and actions such as running, jumping, sprinting, lifting, and tackling, and these are interspersed by periods of low-intensity activities such as walking, jogging, and standing still. We know there's two main positional groups in rugby, forwards and backs, and these two positional groups are further subdivided into specific positions such as front row, second row, and back row in the forwards, and inside and outside backs in the backs. Through the research, we know that backs are generally exposed to greater amounts of total distance, and they are generally exposed to greater amounts of high speed and very high speed running demands. Conversely to this, we know that our forwards have a greater collision total and are exposed to greater amounts of collision demands involved in greater amounts of static contractile efforts, such as mauling, scrumming, and hitting rucks. Um, the assessment used in this intervention followed a test-retest design in which we completed an initial bout of testing. The results from this testing were then compared to the normative data of high-performing peers. This data was collected by Leinster Rugby, which is a professional rugby club most closely associated to the school in which this intervention took place. And the normative data was collected over the previous 5 years by Leinster Rugby uh, of their underage programs, and the data is position specific. Um, After comparing these two data sets, we then conducted an intervention, 4-week intervention designed at improving lower limb strength and power, as these were the two areas recognized as being important for the key outcome measure, and also that were lacking in our participants. Following the 4-week intervention, we did a post-testing session in which we were able to observe any changes which may have occurred across the 4 weeks. So the key outcome variable identified in this study was ball carrying. So we know that the ability to be dominant in the collision area has been listed as a key performance indicator for rugby. The ball carry forms one half of the main collision area in rugby, which is the tackle. So we know that we have the ball carrier and we have the tackler. When these two come together, we have the tackle, and this is, as I said, one of the main collision areas within rugby. The participant in this study is a back row forward, who we know from the research is going to be exposed to multiple collisions, and that this is a key performance indicator for them, and they're going to have many opportunities to carry the ball within a performance. So therefore, it's fair to say that the ability to carry the ball with good effect is going to be a key performance indicator for this participant. So looking at the key dependent variables that constitute an effective ball carry, we know there's cognitive, physical, and technical stroke tactical elements which contribute to an effective ball carry. However, for the purpose of this study, the cognitive and technical tactical elements won't be looked at, but the physical factors will be examined. So we know from the research that power and strength, more specifically lower limb strength and power, are two key muscular qualities underpinning the ability to carry the ball. So I've just done out a simple theoretical model here, which demonstrates where and how power and strength influence the ability to carry the ball in rugby union. Moving on to our methods, our participant was a male, 18 years old, who was 189 centimeters tall and weighed at 96.4 kilograms in the pre-testing session. He plays in the forwards. He's a back row, and he's defined as a sub-elite player, as he's previously been selected to represent Leinster Rugby at the under 18s level. And he also is a regular starter in the school in which he plays, which is a senior school that participates in the highest level of schools rugby in the country. The experimental design was a test, intervention, retest design. So we took our participants through an initial testing session. We then designed a 4-week intervention based on the results we found in that testing session, and then we retested the participant at the end of the session. Testing protocols: the participant rested for 48 hours prior to the testing. He followed appropriate nutrition advice around carbohydrate loading prior to performance, and he followed a standardized warm-up routine before each testing session. Testing protocols used were a counter movement jump and a standing broad jump to assess lower limb power. The counter movement jump has previously been found to be an effective and meaningful tool for assessing lower limb power. The participant was instructed to have his hands on hips throughout the entirety of the movement and to land with straight legs. Verbal cues were used throughout the movement to encourage the participants to jump as high as they could, and the opto jump measurement system was used to measure our counter movement jump in centimeters. Opto jump has previously been found to be valid and reliable for assessing counter movement jump height performance. Standing broad jump was used to assess horizontal lower limb power. The participant was allowed to have their hands free for the duration of the movement, so they could swing their hands. They just had to stick their landing, and if they were to fall forward or fall backwards upon landing, then the trial didn't count. Uh, the broad jump was measured using a tape measure and ruler. The participant was instructed to start their two sets of toes behind the line, and they were instructed to jump as far as they could and stick the landing. Upon landing, a ruler was placed behind the heel of the hindmost foot, and this was matched up to the corresponding value on the tape measure, which gave us our reading. 2 minutes were given as a rest period between each jump trial, and should the participant have failed any trials, they're allowed to retest. Uh, the participant was given 2 valid trials for each protocol. Following the jump assessments, the participant took part in lower limb strength testing through a 3-rep max front squat. The front squat was selected for the assessment tool as it was the squat pattern most commonly used by the participant in their school's strength and conditioning program. And additionally to this, it was also the strength measure used by Leinster Rugby as part of the normative data provided for this intervention. A standardized loading protocol was used to take the participant up through these various percentages until they're able to achieve their 1 rep max for 3 reps. And the whole protocol was observed by the school strength and conditioning coach to ensure proper technique was employed for the duration of the testing. So we can see our pre-test data is presented here, and our pre-test data has been compared to that of the normative data of the high performance peers provided by Leinster Rugby. So we can see anthropometrically, our participant was above the normative values for both height and weight, 2.8% and 10.2% respectively. We can see the plyometric data. Our participant has jumped about roughly 3.5 centimeters less than the normative value, which was 88.2% of the normative value, or 11.8% lower, and they jumped 8.4% further than the normative value for the standing broad jump. In terms of their front squat, they squatted 2.7% less, than the normative value for front squat, which equated to 2.5 kilos less than the normative value for front squat. So we can see that while our participant scores quite well in his testing, he's still quite a ways off in terms of lower limb power and a small bit off in terms of lower limb strength. So these were the 2 target areas for the intervention, and the intervention was conducted through 2 supervised resistance training sessions weekly. Both sessions were total body strength and power development. The reason for total body was because this intervention took place in season, so therefore an holistic gym program had to be provided to ensure full readiness to perform was achieved for the individual. Progressive overload was employed throughout the intervention through weekly target setting. The participant was instructed to plateau load on each of their main movements throughout the intervention, and should they hit their target weight for 2 sets or more on week 1, they would then progress their target weight by 2.5 kilos going into week 2 or the following week. Should they not be able to hit their target weight for at least 2 sets, or they only hit it for 1 set, then they would stay at the same weight for the following week, with the idea that the following week they would then squat it for at least 2 sets or more, or lift it for 2 sets or more. Following the 4-week intervention, retesting took place, and we see our post-test data is presented here. So we can see height stayed the same, of course, across the 4-week intervention, but weight did change. So our participant managed to increase a weight by 1.7 kilograms, which would correspond to a 1.8% change. Our counter movement jump saw a 3.6% change or a 1.3 centimeter change in the positive direction. So they managed to jump 37.2 centimeters upon retesting. In standing broad jump, they jumped 235 centimeters, which is a 3 centimeter change or a 1.3% change. And in their 3 rep max front squat, they managed to squat 7.5 kilos heavier, which was an 8.3% change at 97.5 kilos. When comparing this post-test data to our high-performing peers or our normative data, we can now see that our participant has now bridged the gap significantly compared to his high-performing peers. So he's now partially eclipsed the front squat of his of the normative data by 5%, and he's bridged the gap of the counter movement jump by a further 3% to be now 91.4% of the normative value. Here we can just see the graphical representations of all our post-test data. So we can see on the top left graph, just the bar charts in showing that change across all 3 measurements across the intervention. We see in this bottom left graph in the corner, the 7.5 kilo increase from post-test to pre-test across the 4 week intervention. And then in terms of plyometric data, we see both for the counter movement jump and the standing broad jump, we found a large change in terms of the data, which is a positive outcome for this intervention. So just to wrap things up and to conclude, we can conclude that a 4 week resistance training intervention is effective at improving measures of lower limb strength and power outputs. That progressive overload and specificity are important factors to implement in a resistance training program, and that I feel that the intervention was possibly limited by the time of season in which it was conducted. That the fact that it took place in season meant that external load was already quite high on the participant, which possibly limited how much you could lift in terms of the training sessions. Time of season also meant that there was rugby training sessions going on at the same time as resistance training sessions. If were this that intervention take place in the off season, we could possibly put on more resistance training sessions. And also the duration of the intervention. It was only a 4 week intervention, which is quite a relatively short period of time. Were we able to do this intervention for 8 or 10 weeks, we would likely see a more meaningful change for all measurements, and once again bridge that gap a little bit more between our participants and the normative data. I feel this highlights the importance of a year-round strength and conditioning program to support players in terms of their athletic development for performance. Finally, just my references here at the end, and thank you for listening to me.